Hello, everyone. This is André Fauteux. I'm editor and publisher of 21st Century Housing, based in Quebec, which is in French, La Maison du 21e siècle. And today I'm very, very pleased to have Tim Shukley and Luder Birch with me to speak about home automation and energy issues. Ludo is president and key engineer at Horizon Technologies in Victoria, British Columbia. He's an electronics engineer and manager with more than 40 years of experience in data communication, automation controls, integration, energy, and environment. And I'll stop there because both your CVs are very long. But
Yes.
Tim, I've known you for a while. You're a PhD in communications. You are secretary of the ISO IEC Data Management and Interchange uh, Committee. And also, I'm not sure if you still are, also for the ISO IEC Home Electronic Systems Secretary of that committee. And you're working with Ludo on a new standard. Uh, First of all, thank you very much for being with us today, gentlemen. And which one of you would like to introduce? First of all, this work you're doing, standards isn't a very sexy issue for consumers, but it's going to, there's a lot happening in the energy environment. And I'm seeing here in Quebec, over 70% of homes are heated with electricity. So we're very unique. But our recently reelected premier wants to dam our last beautiful rivers up north because we're about to run out of power. And we're lucky to have clean hydro, but we're in a bind because we have a lot of we're exporting a lot to New England to decarbonize our utilities, and we also have a lot of data centers and aluminum smelters and what have you setting shop in Quebec because of our cheap power. So we need to save energy, and we have peak power problems on very cold winter mornings. Hydro Quebec is asking us to heat less. They're subsidizing heat pumps and um, heat storage in huge bricks that we put in furnaces. It's just a new pilot project. But to me, few people are interested in those things. But am I wrong to think that energy security is going to be the big issue because of climate change?
Yeah, Tim, maybe you can introduce the whole concept of Emma. It sounds like a good opportunity.
Well, let me correct one thing you said earlier, or update anyway. I've no longer serving as secretariat for the data management. I've focused all of my work now in the committee on home electronic system is called HES,
Okay.
and having to do with interconnection of information technology equipment in ISO and IEC. And that's where I work with Ludo on projects we've worked for together for maybe 40 years or more
Yes, a long time.
on various related entirely to the home systems and building systems.
Okay. And
But
please tell us what ISO and IEC are.
ISO is the International Organization for Standardization, which is headquartered in Geneva, as also its sister organization called IEC, which is the International Electrotechnical Commission. The IEC standardizes everything to do with electricity. It was created when electricity was first introduced in 1907. And ISO standardizes everything else, but computers and communications are both hardware and software, both electricity and other things as well. So there are joint committees called a series of joint committees on information technology, and we're part of that, which
Okay.
is a team between ISO and IEC.
Okay.
And Tim, I understand there are offices in Geneva. There's a hallway connecting the two.
Well, they used to be in the same building. I think that ISO has outgrown it now, and they've got another building next door. But they
Okay.
worked very closely together for forever and ever, since the early 1900s.
Okay. So what is Emma?
Well, EMMA is a term that we coined a number of years ago, which just means energy management and measuring. Energy management and measurement, which is a system which would kind of, you could consider it to be, initially it was inspired as kind of the second next generation smart meter that would run on optical fiber and use primarily energy management is takes place in the building, and the some point that I made many years ago with the paper I wrote in the published in 2012 was called "Getting Smarter About the Smart Grid," which is freely available on the internet. That paper really made the point that energy needs to be managed on the premises, not in a power utility. And so uploading data with smart meters doesn't do any good. What's more important is using the smart meter data on the premises to manage energy. And that's the first prototypes of smart meters that we designed back in the early, into something entirely different.
Connection did cut there. You said in the early
1990s. Yeah. 19, for instance, what's now called AMI was an outgrowth of the standards that we developed called C.12 in 1992, or began in 92 and was finished a few years later.
Okay, so what does all this mean for the consumer? What's coming up?
Well, basically, it means that energy needs to be managed on the premises. It can't be measured or managed at a utility, because the utility doesn't control the loads in the system. They can only control the supply. They can't necessarily control the loads. And as more and more loads, the homes and buildings are not only loads now, or sucking up energy or using energy, but they also store energy with batteries, and they produce energy with solar panels and other technologies on the premises. So that's where the action is. It's on the premises. It's not in the power utility, and the power utility just is a part of the supply. And now they're trying to undertake broader roles, but they don't really know how to do it, and they haven't done a very good job of it.
Well, here Hydro-Quebec created a spin-off, which is private and unregulated, which is harming private industry. But they basically give, they offer to sell gadgets, and they give you rebates if you reduce your peak loads. But I'm not too excited about the fact that it's all about smart meters pulsing, pulse microwaves, which are a suspected carcinogen, actually proven carcinogen with rats. It's the same type of tumors that the U.S. National Toxicology Program caused in rats, the same type of tumors we see in humans, such as gliomas. And everything is about wireless bouncing off everywhere in the home, all the Internet of Objects, everything has pulsing antennas. Is that a problem also for cybersecurity and other safety issues?
Oh yeah, well it is a problem. There's been an over use of wireless for things that shouldn't be. I guess the reason the meters were wireless was because back when they were first introduced, even in 2000, they were basically, there wasn't any high-speed access to homes and buildings like there is now, growing with fiber, optical fiber networks, which are going everywhere now. And in those days,
smart meters using fiber optics?
No, they should be, but they're not. I mean, they
not yet.
They can't.
You
not
think
really.
they will? You think they will down the road?
Well, they will only if we replace them with EMMA. Otherwise, the meter networks are slow and cumbersome, and for a lot of other reasons than just the radiation exposure. There's a lot of insecurity with them. There's a lot of problems, and they just aren't up to the task that is required now for managing energy.
So if ISO publishes standards, it doesn't mean utilities and governments will adopt them. What's the incentive for them, Ludo, to adopt such standards?
Well, I think a lot of the standards that we're working on are interoperability standards.
Which means
And and what that means is one manufacturer's products can work with another manufacturer's product. And that is actually the program that that Tim was talking about, Emma, allows for multiple manufacturers to make different products where their expertise in. And versus some other systems where you're locked into a particular manufacturer.
VHS or beta.
Yeah, and you just keep buying and buying and buying. This way, you can have manufacturers that, for instance, are expert in making little buttons that need no batteries because the energy of your finger is generating electricity to send a message. And that actually is a protocol that we have within our SC25 group, the group that Tim is talking about. And so you can have a manufacturer making that product versus another manufacturer that maybe makes an inverter talking to a solar panel. And that would be a completely different company. But through Emma, they would have a common language that they would be able to communicate to each other. And the end result for the consumer is they have the flexibility for the products. At the same time, you know that they're going to interoperate. And a key part of all of this is what Tim started with, is the international standards through ISO and IEC. That's the umbrella under which we develop the standards. And that provides, it does take time to develop the standards, and we're involving a lot of different organizations and countries. And I think it's that power of having multiple countries, a worldwide standard for multiple manufacturers, allowing to interoperate, which will give the real value to consumers.
But are there major countries and manufacturers who are backing this work that you're doing?
Very interestingly, and Tim and I were talking about this the other day, on the basis of the gateway, of which the HES gateway, we already have significant participation from countries such as China, Japan, Korea, North America, and we also have participation from Europe. So we do have the major players and the major countries involved. It's a matter now of getting the message out as far as what it is, how it's going to be useful, and that's part of why we're quite interested in your interest in this, Andre, because it gives an opportunity to highlight what Emma is all about.
Jim?
Yeah, and Andre, just to give you an example, one of the participants, just one of them in our committee, and that we just wrote a standard that's now being circulated, adopted internationally, is for controlling heat pumps made by Panasonic, and a communication system that talks to those that controls those heat pumps. That is a joint standard in Japan called EcoNet, which is supported by Mitsubishi and Panasonic or Matsushita, and all of the Japanese manufacturers. And they're also, now we're standardizing a home battery system device for them as well. And that will be part of the Emma bag of tricks, which will be in the building. And we also are standardizing with our sister committee, Working Group 3, which is premises wiring and cabling, new versions of Ethernet that are very cheap, that don't use Cat5 cable, that can use just ordinary twisted pair wire, that and will supply power to the devices, so that you have DC power over Ethernet cabling in buildings, and that creates a lot of opportunities to get rid of the unreliability and other problems with wireless signaling in buildings.
We're not the only place in the world where there are a lot of violent storms these days. We had a few days of outage in the spring in Quebec. I'm an hour north of Montreal. And I work at home on the lakefront in the mountains. We're lucky. but I need my computer to work and my freezer and my fridge. So I've had under a kilowatt of solar panels and especially lead acid batteries for 12 years, and they died during the outage, of course. And so now I have 10 kilowatt hours of Voltium energy batteries made of lithium. And my neighbor who has a $500 generator, he burned $600 of gas.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, you're pretty green," when I put $8,000 into my two batteries, which take up a lot of space, a lot less space, by the way, than my lead batteries, which needed to be ventilated because they gave off hydrogen, which could have blown up my house. So I'm glad I got rid of those. But again, is there an incentive, especially I think of Quebec, but elsewhere, is it an incentive for people to go for lithium batteries? Solar panels are cheap these days, but the batteries are another issue, right?
Well, the batteries are moving. The technology behind the batteries is moving very fast, and it's improving almost daily with all the emphasis that's been given to it by the automotive industry. But the spinoff for the home is really a good thing, because one thing you'll hear from us a lot is that we're big fans of solar, rooftop solar, local solar on your house, and your ability to use it, whether or not there's electricity coming from the power grid, because we can't always rely on the power grid now. We've learned the hard way, as you did in Quebec and in Nova Scotia. So, and the people in Florida right now, I mean, you have to have batteries with all solar systems, and that'll be cheap enough to do. A general rule of thumb is that if you build a rooftop solar system for your house, and you have the type of equipment to support it with proper kind of inverters and batteries, you will about a third of the cost of the system will be the battery, or the batteries. And lithium ion batteries are the latest current battery, but there's a lot of research going on. I don't think they will, in the long term, I think there will be a lot cheaper and safer alternatives even than lithium ion batteries, although they're not bad. And even people are still putting in the lead acid batteries that are sealed, and you use gel cells. Those are pretty well developed too, and they're recyclable. So there's no, and I think the biggest thing for consumers is going to be have a reliable power, primarily to operate your heating and your refrigeration, because that's what it takes to survive in your house until they get the grid fixed. And sometimes it will take a long time. In Puerto Rico, it's taken years to get that grid fixed, and it's not fixed yet. So,
and in fact, in the Emma project, one of the
talk about microgrids.
Yeah, and one of the key elements of that is to have priority buses, power buses within your own home.
What's a bus again? BUS stands for?
BUS, yeah. So your standard AC, your alternating current that you plug into the wall, has been going on since the 1900s, Tim, something like that.
Yeah, you could call that a bus too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one is DC.
But is bus an acronym? What does bus mean?
No, it just means a pathway. It's the term of engineering term meaning a path for a particular power path.
Okay.
Yeah. And the point is, a lot of the electronics nowadays are using DC. Your telephone, your cell phone, your computer. And so to translate that voltage from one to another type is inefficient. So within the Emma
it pollutes, also creates dirt electricity to convert.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if we start with a solid DC bus, power bus, then your DC products can then be much more efficient for your phones, for your computer, so you can keep operating on a power down. But also there are other technologies such as refrigerators that can run on lower voltages and much more efficient if they're running on DC.
Yeah, one point is that people don't know this, but the appliance industry that makes dishwashers and washing machines and all that, they're already using DC inside the appliance for the motors, and they're converting from the high voltage AC to the low voltage DC to run the appliance internally. So if there were a consumer demand for DC appliances and the ability to deliver it in a house, there might be you might see the switchover from by the appliance industry to more efficient and cheaper appliances.
Speaking of appliances, what do you think of the Internet of Object? All these different bells and whistles applications are offering us. Are there any use really to the consumer?
What kind of bells and whistles are you talking about?
Tell you what's in your fridge, or do you need to change your
Oh,
diaper because there's a humidity sensor in the diaper?
Well, you have to keep in mind these corporations are focused not on delivering value to customers, but to making money for investors. That's always the case. So they are just hyping the stuff to get to make their product look, have more pizzazz. But those are useless features as far as I'm concerned. The basic function of a smart appliance would be to be able to know whether it's on or off, how much power it's using, and turn it on and off.
And to go into low power mode if necessary.
Yeah, those are the things that are important. Not looking at a camera inside your refrigerator. That's kind of silly.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we see that in the cars now too. The cars are automobiles. They're just trying to figure out how much electronics to pack in there, so they can make more money and get some leg up on their competitors. But most of it is useless and unsafe and drives up unnecessarily the cost of the vehicle.
Unsafe? What level?
Can fail, and people be dependent on these features like these all the touting of self-driving cars or the autopilot in the Tesla. I mean, that's a ridiculous bunch of hype, and it's not safe because people might think it's working and then suddenly realize when they're about to hit the wall that it's not safe.
Mm-hmm. Who invented the term prosumer, and what is it?
I think I first saw that term in a government study of energy. The idea is that every consumer of electricity will ultimately also be a producer of electricity, as we were talking earlier about rooftop solar and batteries. And you can produce your own electricity, and you could conceivably even sell it to your neighbors with a local power grid, and that's what microgrids are able to do. That's another topic we could talk about at some point.
What is a microgrid? Does it mean the batteries are not in people's homes, but they're elsewhere? Or?
No. All the homes have the ability. The first level is that all homes and all solar systems should have batteries associated with them, and then they can connect to their neighbors and share that. So in case one person needs more than another, they can come up with ways of sharing it within the community, not to the electric utility, but within the local community. And that local community could be one house, could be two houses or three houses or a dozen houses or a whole campus.
Or a city, yeah.
A part of a city, but it could be standalone. And the concept of a microgrid is a detachable, islandable, they call it. That's the term, island. It can be islanded if necessary and self-sustaining, at least for a period of time, disconnected from the main grid until the main grid is restored. Of course, on an island, you don't even have a main grid. You have the island, so it's an island already. A lot of villages and the coastal villages in the Alaska and in the north, probably in Canada as well, have their own power systems. In the past, they run on diesel, but now they can run on solar and wind.
Well,
and we have a big issue of that on the BC coast. Yeah, with a lot of the communities running on diesel. And of course, that's very environmentally unfriendly. And there's a big push now to replace that with wind and solar, and of course, backed up with battery.
Hydro-Quebec wants to spend 2 or 3 billion, I think it's 2 billion, to have through an undersea cable to the Magdalen Islands, which is close to Nova Scotia, where my sister lives, where the lobster fishermen just retired.
Well, yeah. You're talking to the person that lives on an island, Vancouver Island,
yeah,
and we're connected to the mainland through underwater submarine cables. And the majority of our power actually comes from the mainland.
What distance? You're not too far from the mainland, though.
No, it's 20, 30 miles, but
yeah,
anything under that, under that ocean is a big cost.
So Ludo, tell me a little bit about the work you've done with utilities in Canada.
Yeah, over the years, I've done work with a number of the utilities. Of course, being in BC, I've represented a number of environmental groups trying to move BC Hydro in a more sustainable way. And that's been quite a bit of effort. We also have Fortis, and I've also participated in regulatory hearings with Fortis. And actually,
it's an electric utility?
Yeah, electric utility. They actually also do gas, but I was involved in the electric aspect. And then I was actually participating in the smart meter program in Hydro-Quebec, representing sorry?
What did you do with Hydro?
For that, I was representing environmental groups that wanted to ensure that if we did have smart meters, that it was done to the most benefit of the consumer. And so that was quite a bit of a big initiative. It was right when the smart meters were being introduced. And some of the concepts that I represented did come through. But as you know, the smart meter program has many facets to it.
Is it helping Quebec consumers at all?
And this is where it's both a technical and a process question. From a technical point of view, there are certainly benefits that can come from the smart meters. Once you have the smart meters, we're fully recognized there's a lot of issues with them, with EMI and all of that. But once you have that in there, there's supposed to be a benefit to the consumer such that they can see in real time their power consumption every few seconds. And this is information that's available to the consumer and the consumer only. And that was an aspect that I was involved in through the hearing process. And one of the recommendations I had was that Hydro-Quebec should emphasize that and put more work behind how to use that. In BC, and I've done this a number of times in BC, we can go to BC Hydro and connect a third-party device to our smart meter and see in real time what our power consumption is every few seconds. And you can see that on a display, or you can use that in your own home automation system.
Hydro is already offering that to Quebec consumers on their website if you connect to the website, but you do need the smart meter pulsing microwaves, which are noxious for people who are close by and may be more vulnerable. And public health, the government, everyone says it's safe. That's what bugs me. But I'm wondering if I should put a smart meter and put a cage around it. There is a device which is a shield, which is very effective, but it's still going to pulse 30 electricity we need to filter afterwards. But I would like to have that data in real time, though anyone knows, you could program your thermostat, which I've done for years.
Yeah. And I think, and this is where the process comes in, as far as how to get access to your smart meter, that is really controlled by the utility. And the process that's done here in BC is different than in Quebec. And it looks like it's much more difficult to do that, which means the benefit to the consumers is not being realized that could actually be there by the meters that are already installed today.
What does BC offer? Just a second, Tim, I'm sorry. What is What's different in BC versus Quebec?
In BC, you can connect a third-party device. They give rebates. I don't know if they still do. And they very much, the system, the process is fairly straightforward. As I understand, in Quebec, it's not the same process. The high-low is basically a system that hydro controls. And in BC, it's very much the consumer. It's completely controlled by the consumer.
Yeah, high-low is that spin-off of hydro, which is private and unregulated. Tim?
Yeah, that's what you mentioned. Yeah.
Tim, are smart meters benefiting consumers?
Well, I have a little more critical perspective on it than Ludo. Ludo's telling you what could be done from an engineering standpoint.
Right.
But my feeling is that from a political and economic standpoint, they're a total failure, and there's no way that you could say that of the millions, millions of smart meters that are already deployed in North America, less than 3% of them have actually delivered the data that Ludo is talking about. Mm-hmm. He's saying that he can get the data as somebody who has built some equipment that could do it, but the industry has not made that available and has no intention of doing it. It's been more of a selling point. Oh, here's the wonders that you can do, but they don't do it because it isn't in their interest to do it.
Hydro-Quebec could say they are offering the data, but it's on their website.
Yeah, how many people will use something like that? That's ridiculous. It's got to be automated in equipment that's installed in your house by yourself or by, and I suspect that what's going to be offered will be something that will be more about gaining control of the consumer than empowering the consumer. So that's just my feeling about it, and that's why we're working on international standards to replace this system of meters with something that is open standards that are free, available to everyone, and also open source software that will be built to support it, so that manufacturers can build products that actually serve consumer interests and not just a bunch of utility hype.
So how many years before they come into the market with major players?
Well, we need to move fast because with the way the climate is getting changing so fast right now, we don't have a lot of time. So this needs to happen soon, and it could be done. Solar could be installed much more widely than it is if this kind of equipment were available, and but the trouble that it will run into is that there will be the institutional inertia of the utility industry will not be interested in that, because they have a long history of getting their earnings for their investors, and this includes Hydro-Quebec, by capital expense, spending money on big capital projects like
hydro dams,
solar farms, wind farms, transmission systems, and they get to make up to 10% return on capital on that, and it's an investment approach rather than about delivering energy to empowering local communities and people to be self-sufficient in energy. And that's the big stumbling block that we face. So I would be very cautious about looking at whatever equipment is going to be offered by the utility industry.
Some people say that high-low may offer solar panels in the near future. And we do have a microgrid in Lac Mégantic where there was a big train wreck, huge fire, a lot of people died. But that's it. It's always Hydro's interest. Hydro is owned by Quebecers, theoretically, but it's really the government wants profits to finance our hospitals and our schools, which are really all pretty moldy, except for 2 super hospitals. But and our premier is the oldest politician in Quebec, probably. he's really big on retiring in a few years and making history with huge hydro dams like Robert Bourassa built in the 70s. And but so what are the alternatives? We have an energy futures commission, and one of the co-presidents, Normand Mousseau, a physicist, who says smart meters are very safe, by the way. He sees that there will be too much opposition from natives and environmental groups against those huge hydro dams, but he sees like 2,000 or 3,000 windmills.
Well, isn't the purpose of any large-scale generation, particularly the big dams, but also the huge windmills, is to export the power. It's to export it, sell it, and make money off of selling it, exporting it. Is that really in the best interest of the people? I think you need to look you need to look very closely at that, because it's
there's also our duty. You know, if we can help New York and Boston, all of New England decarbonize, we're contributing to that.
Yeah, but they should be doing the same thing I'm talking about. They shouldn't be depending on Canada for.
They don't need our power, yeah. If they go solar, yeah.
Everybody should have their. I'm all a fan of community empowerment, local microgrids, localized energy, and democratized energy, not run by big institutions.
Yeah. Is there a push away from gas heating in the U.S.? You know, in Quebec now, they're neck and neck, the price of electricity. We have probably the cheapest electricity in the world. But are people going to heat more with electricity and biomass in the future in the States?
Well, there's a big push to move to off of gas. It's a very contentious issue, but there's a lot of effort to electrify. They call it electrification of everything, but the only problem with that is you have to also decarbonize your electricity supply.
Yeah.
So you have got to do both, and to decarbonize transportation by getting it electrified, as well as everything, heating of buildings with natural gas. I mean, natural gas is probably the worst thing you could choose, because for two reasons: it produces CO2. But it is in itself a greenhouse gas, and it's notoriously leaking all the time. A large percentage of the natural gas is actually leaked into the atmosphere. It doesn't burn.
It's methane.
Yeah, it's methane, and so it's 30 times or 40 times more damaging to the climate than the carbon dioxide. Mm-hmm. So it's a real hazard to have, and we have to get away from it, but we also have to get the electricity system moved over to solar.
But you also need super efficient homes, and there are very little of those being built or being retrofitted to slash in 2 or 3 the heating bill for the northern states. What are your options? That's why I mentioned biomass.
Well, biomass still creates carbon, so that's not a great answer. It's better, I suppose, but the best thing is solar. There's plenty of sunshine, plenty of solar, and distributed solar is the ultimate choice.
Paired with storage. Will we be seeing more and more heat pumps being powered by solar? And
yeah.
Not in coldest climates like Quebec.
Well, you can get heat pumps that are cold weather heat pumps.
Does the PV produce enough electricity?
Sure.
Homes?
Yeah, you can. Solar panels getting cheaper all the time. You could build a building that would be with storage. You could certainly do that. Yes.
We're talking in Quebec. We have a pilot project with hot water heaters fed directly by PV. But, you know, our loads for heating 10, 20,000 kilowatt hours, that's a lot of power for a winter.
But I think you mentioned efficiency, though. Efficiency is the cheapest electricity you can get. That's cheaper than solar.
Yeah.
Efficiency. So that's what
Insulation and
you do first.
yeah.
Then you go to solar.
And I believe in Quebec, you still have a lot of baseboard heating, correct?
Exactly, but now they're really pushing it to heat pumps. You know, I have too many splits here, and a fireplace, of course. But you know, we have up to 5,000, as you know, Ludo, of subsidies, federal, provincial. But people are really cashing in on those to insulate and make their homes more airtight and buy heat pumps and super windows. People are motivated.
Well, that's the first thing to do would be make the building more efficient. Get as much, if you're building a new building, you should always situate it in a way that it can benefit from passive solar, and then active solar for the rest, and batteries. And then that is the future of energy, that at least what it should be, I think, or what it could be. If it weren't for the need for investors to make money off of centralized systems.
Right. And that's the thing with natural gas. Once you get more energy efficient homes, you tend to have oversized furnaces versus electric is much more targeted. So you can put the energy where you want it in the rooms that you want. And certainly with the heat pumps, you can do that.
Mm-hmm. BC is really interesting to Quebecers. Of course, it's the West Coast, but you have hydropower. It's warmer than it is here, but Vancouver has some of the best standards. The provincial government seems to be blocking Montreal and other cities from being as avant-garde in terms of passive homes and all that. Are you involved a little bit in those really advanced houses still?
Yeah, over the years certainly have been, and there is a lot of initiatives to push the envelope of energy efficiency in more ways than the generation. And that's right from the windows to the insulation. I've been involved in a number of housing projects where we've really pushed the envelope of
energy. Are there net zero
efficiency
targets in BC? Because a lot of people talk 2030, but provinces haven't really committed.
Well, yeah, I think what we're getting is the push from the municipalities that are enforcing and putting in building codes, in some cases before the province catches up, because of tends to be a lot of political issues, and within the cities there, you have some leading cities and they say, well, we've got to move on this whether or not the province is there, and then eventually the province does catch up. So I don't know, Tim, if you're seeing it at the municipal level, but we're certainly seeing the environment and energy efficiency being pushed on the municipal level.
Tim, you're in Colorado, a very progressive state.
Well, parts of it are, yes. The most creative, I'd say, parts of the state are the rural parts, which are now generally get their electricity from rural electric associations because they're small, they're localized, they're owned by the people that live there, and their customers own the utility, and they're serving their interests, and so they're doing some of the more creative projects right now in Colorado. One of that I could mention is Holy Cross Energy just did a microgrid in a town, a new town that was being built. They're also deploying batteries and solar systems all over their territory. They haven't got all the control systems they need to do that as effectively, and that's why we're working on EMA. So we see the future that propelling when that's available, it could propel the future of this kind of localization of energy, particularly with the rural electric associations, and municipals will do that too, or are able to do it. Let's put it that way. They're not constrained by regulators they could do whatever they want. But unfortunately, there's a culture that has been, 100 years old culture in the utility industry in general that says that really constrains what they can do because they believe in things. That's how the smart meter got so popular. It got to be part of the culture. It was not that it provided a benefit, but that it was part of the culture. Oh, we need to have this. We can't.
I know Obama gave billions, so let's.
Yeah. If everyone's doing it, it must be smart, right?
Yeah. In
That's
Quebec,
a smart grid.
It's interesting that you mention municipalities because newly elected government got 40% of votes and 2/3 or 3/4 of all the seats. So they're basically going to be doing whatever they want. The opposition is split between four other parties. But there was an article saying that it's the municipalities that are going to be the real opposition in Quebec. And it's happening more and more with all the infrastructure problems. So I think, yeah, the energy security, I think we need to get our mayors involved in that, interested more and more.
Yeah, when you
Exactly.
get a system that's insecure, the best thing to do is break it up into smaller pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ludo, tell me more about what's happening in Canada.
Well,
Pickering has one in a microgrid in Ontario.
yeah, we have a number of microgrids throughout BC. We have a government that's been promoting in some ways the microgrid concept. And I know in Ontario, over here in BC, we have a number of microgrids typically related to some of the education facilities. But I think it can certainly move more and faster. And I think some of the international standards, which I think are now coming to the point. I would say over the last couple years, the standardization in this area, at least in the areas that Tim and I are working on, have moved significantly. So where before it was premature to really talk about the ramifications, the potential ramifications of using them, now we're at the point that it starts to make sense from the utilities, from the consumer, and from the co-ops. So I think that's a lot that we're talking about now. Is the standards are getting mature to the point that it makes sense to now talk about it. And I think what Tim was talking about at the EMA is definitely one that we can really nail down, and that consumers can start to see what the ramifications are.
Well, you're making a very good point, because I've been writing about energy efficiency and healthy homes for 30 years, and we're often discouraged and cynical when we see that things move very slowly. But now with climate change, I think everyone understands we all have to pull together. I like to show my CMHC poster with Leonardo in the back. And it says the art of finding solutions. And as we saw in Mégantic, Hydro is testing a first microgrid. Tell me more about the incentive for huge utilities to have these microgrids. Well, it's 20% of the power that they could supply. It's just not full.
No, my feeling is that large utilities do not want microgrids, because
it's idealistic and naive.
They do not want them, because they want to supply the power from large centralized facilities, large wind farms, large solar farms, and large transmission, because that's where they make their money. Off of that, they get a 10% return on capital on that. If you put the solar panels on your roof, they don't make any money off that, or make very little. All they get to do is maintain the wires and poles and bill you for that, but that's not a big capital deal. So, solar is too cheap. That's why they don't like it. At least distributed solar would be too cheap.
Well, you're making me cynical again, but we had a talk recently in Montreal where the director of planning, I'm not sure if he's a VP at Hydro-Québec for energy efficiency and planning, and he said that peak power rates cannot be imposed in Quebec. There won't be any social acceptability, because everybody heats with electricity. And, you can't charge double, triple the rates when it's really cold for tenants who are, on welfare and what have you. But everywhere in the world where smart meters were installed, we saw these peak power rates being imposed. Ludo, what's your take on solutions for Quebec to reduce our peak power? Because just to explain to people, when hydro is short of power, when everyone's heating, if it's minus 20 below in Quebec, they have to either start thermal production plants, i.e. with diesel, or I don't think we have any coal here, or else we import power generated by gas turbines, whatever.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I was involved in a group that was a stakeholder group with BC Hydro. And we were a collection of industry players, environmental groups, and so on. And we got involved in some very specific and very detailed discussions with Hydro as far as, blue skying, where should we go with all of the possibilities and the capabilities out there. And even though my background is, smart home work and home automation and so on, it was interesting that the group, not coaxed by myself, came up with the best route that you could, or one of the best routes to obtain higher efficiencies and dealing with the peaks is actually having smarter appliances and having them being able to manage themselves. And it was very interesting seeing that coming out from this stakeholder group. And I think that's part of what we're seeing with Hydro-Quebec in their push with high-low, in that the utility is seeing the benefits of having smarter appliances and maximizing their grid that way.
So the
But
grid
I
would
think
kind of
the
say,
issue there is the ownership, Tim, and I think you've looked at how the high-low works.
do I really need hydro or high low to send a message to my dryer to say don't start this morning? People,
No, and
every time there's a
yeah,
huge cold spell, it's all over the TV, radio, and papers, and people save tons and tons of power and help Hydro Quebec. Do we
yeah,
need these
Well,
gadgets?
the simple answer is that the home or building needs to know what the conditions of the grid are. That's all they need to know, and then they can manage the power internally. And
exactly.
that's, I think, the point that Ludo's making is
It doesn't have
should
to
be.
be all wireless.
It has no, it has
No,
to be wired. It's on the premises itself, and they just need to know what there has to be some communication from the electric power grid to the home, telling it, well, we're short of power or we're not,
exactly.
whatever it is, a price signal or some kind of signal, and then the homes could adapt to that and control their own energy.
Right. And that's the difference. It involves both at a technical level and a policy level, but the key is the messaging from the utility, and this is wherever you are, we think should be, we have an issue, we'd like you home to reduce your consumption. That's the level of message that goes to the home. And then it's up to the home to say, okay, here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to delay my hot water heater. I'm going to set my thermostat down or up depending on which season you are, versus the utility saying directly inside the home what to do with your appliances. And I think that's the big difference that needs to happen. And the utilities are being provided with technical solutions that allow them direct control of the devices. But in the long term, for the consumers, it's the other aspect of reduce, and it's up for the home itself to do the adjustment.
Brings me
Well,
to Tim's other great paper. Tim, let's talk about the future of landlines. Can we really foresee that in a decade or so we would have the information coming from the utility over my fiber optics and coaxial cable and Ethernet, talking to all my appliances, but how much is it going to cost and who's going to pay for it?
No, the communication is already there. It's called optical fiber networks. They're being installed, at least with the pandemic that we've experienced over the last 3 years. There was
I
this
have it coming to
recognition
my home. Yeah.
that we needed to have high-speed access, and it wasn't going to be done by wireless, like 5G or something like that. It was not practical. We had to be optical fiber. That's the cheapest, most reliable, far and away, and high speed connect, and that's been a huge success lately. And in the U.S., a lot of funding behind it, and I'm sure it's possible in Canada as well. I'm not too up to date on what's going on in Eastern Canada anyway. But
It's our cable company brings the phone service, internet, and TV. But Hydro-Quebec's not involved. They're not sending data over that cable. That's what I want.
well, if you have internet access, you can get the data anyways. You know.
Yeah, but they won't give it to me if I don't have a smart meter.
Well, that's a big problem. That is, they have to make that data available, and
there are 53,000 homes in Quebec.
The key difference to remember, Andre, between what we're doing with Emma and what Hilo does is the Emma empowers the consumer, and Hilo empowers the utility, and gives them direct control over your dishwasher.
Yeah,
that's not the right way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I hope NRCan doesn't listen to this talk, because I want to ask them to finance your talk. in the conference I'm organizing.
We just have to tell them the truth, and they can figure out what to do.
Yeah, I think it's the best for everyone to have high speed and security and all that. But again, my question, okay, the cable is paid for outside. The government put millions of subsidies, but once it's coming in my house with coaxial and then Ethernet on my 3 floors, how much is it going to cost to have my home talking to all the appliances? And then I have to change all my appliances?
No, you should do it over time, but there are ways to
with
control
the dryer. Start with the dryer.
There are ways to control that stuff without having to replace the appliance. Ideally, new appliances would be better, but as time goes by, that will happen. But it won't happen unless we provide the control infrastructure in the house, localized, building-oriented, consumer-oriented control infrastructure that will.
Ludo, could you do it? I have 2 mini split heat pumps. One is brand new. It's a Trane. Can you set something up to have it talking to hydro and my hot water heater and my dryer?
Yeah,
absolutely. That's what we do. We've done that a lot.
One of our standards, Andre, one of our standards is called CTA 20. What is it, Ludo? What's the number? I don't know. It's a standard for controlling water heaters, and it's mandated by law in Oregon and Washington right now for new water heaters. That is standardized by our committee.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's all definitely possible.
It's a standard to control hot water heaters
for new ones. Yeah.
Okay.
And Tim, you said that's mandated in Oregon, California.
It's on the it's going in California. It's in the being adopted right now as we speak, and it's already law in Oregon and Washington State.
So what's it cost if somebody wants that right now in Canada, Ludo, to start controlling appliances?
Oh, absolutely.
With wired technology, of course.
Well, you can do it both wireless or wired. And
wired. I don't want wireless. I have zero wireless in my house.
And if Tim mentioned a working group, that's our sister working group. It's called Working Group 3. And their whole focus is cable. And it's amazing the technologies that are coming out for communications over wires. I mean, we're building upon communications that, for instance, on a pair of wires, you can tap a whole bunch of customers or devices on the same pair of wires.
Are they filtering the interference, which is high frequency transients, which feed all cancers, according to Dr. Sam Milham, who is Washington State head epidemiologist for many years? Are you filtering that dirty power? Because in France, they have smart meters over the wires, and a lot of people are sick.
Well, here's a point you really need to remember, that most of the dirty electricity you're talking about, and I see complaints every day about optical fiber being dirty electricity. The reason for the dirty electricity are the cheap junk power supplies, little plug-in wall power supplies they use that are switching power supplies that create all kinds of noise. You can test it with an AM radio. You can walk around your house and detect those things, and you'll see that all the computers that they, not all, but you can buy clean ones, but you have to look, and the dirty ones are cheap.
They're the
And,
cheaper ones. Yeah, it's like
so
the
they,
inverters. The solar inverters can generate a lot unless they're really high quality with a
that's right. The
sign on
quality,
it.
it's a quality issue, and there are standards for those qualities, and they don't follow the standards. And what we've done, and what our the committee that Ludo just mentioned, our working group 3, is adhering to the very strict emission, both radiated and conducted noise, or harmonic emissions on the wires to
It's
avoid them.
interesting. You say
If
a quality issue, it's a power quality issue, and industry and government has always been interested in that to protect the equipment, not the living beings, but that's going to help humans and animals and plants if we have better quality.
Well, sure. And yeah, and then if you have to use wireless for something, you can use it for something that really has to be like a medical implant or something, that really needs to be wireless, instead of having just about everything wireless because it's cheap, and because they get the profits from it.
Well, I like the high end home automation systems like Lutron devices that only pulse when needed, not 24/7 microwave pulsing all over the house.
Yeah, well, there's no need for any of it now.
There's no need for any.
No, I mean, with a rare exception of what I mentioned, medical instruments or something that just has to be, and when you do have a RF device, a radio device, you can make them so that they use minimum amount of transmission. We have one of the standards our committee adopted was specifically for devices that had no batteries, that could,
right,
called
in-ocean.
in-ocean protocol, which was super short packets that just then they turn off, and they only operate when they're absolutely needed, and then they don't waste any energy, and they run off of no battery. They just run off of some local either heat
The
or
push
light,
a button. Yeah.
a push of a button. And some environmental phenomena could generate enough power to operate a very low power
Tim,
short packet system.
I didn't mention you. Are you the inventor of the RFID?
Tim is.
I developed that technology, one of the first ones in about 1980, 1979. That was way before it took off. I mean, it was just used for animal feeding. It was for identifying animals.
Yeah, they're doing that. The SPCA, they put those little antennas under the skin. It's very popular among hipsters in Scandinavia with those antennas under the skin, the chips.
Well, it might be, but right now the main application, from as far as I'm concerned, is my cat.
Yeah.
My cat has one.
So humans don't need them? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
But do you need them for all your appliances in your house?
No, not at all. I'm just telling you for something that, I mean, wireless really should have only be used for things that are mobile, that move, things that move.
But isn't that what all the manufacturers are doing with the new fridges and stoves and what have you? They all have those chips, Zigbee chips.
Yeah, it's really not the right way to go.
And if I want to deactivate it, my warranty is void.
Yeah. Well, their main purpose, the reason they do that is what their focus is collecting data on you to sell to Google.
It's good for them.
Yeah, that's the main reason for all of this equipment, for smartphones too, is to collect data, and for advertising, like Facebook and Google and the IT industry is addicted to that.
I saw last week in Arizona the solicitor, prosecutor general, the attorney general got an out of court settlement with Apple and Samsung for how many $1 million because of all the data they collected and used ethically, if not illegally.
Yeah, there's a great book on that. It's called Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. It's a real deep study of the information technology industry, and particularly Google and Facebook, and how they've their entire business model is around stealing your data.
Stealing.
Not telling you and taking it.
Ludo, I take it you're a member of CABA, the Canadian Automated Buildings Association, or you're more politically correct than Tim?
I
want to say that?
Tim's the one in front of the camera.
But you work with
I usually work in the background and make the stuff work and work on the technology and get everything running. And then Tim, how do we say this? And that's where Tim comes in, right, Tim?
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we could talk for hours, but we hardly talked about Emma. In closing, what would you like to say about these future microgrids? So you think it's only going to be the small utilities? We have very few municipal utilities, unfortunately, in Quebec. How optimistic are you that we're going to see these new standards and technologies in the next few years?
Well, I think that there is, it's the best way that Ludo and I can think of to fight climate change and to convert the electricity system to something sustainable and resilient and safe. And that's our focus. And we have to make that technology available. And the people that will hopefully they will realize at some point they have to have that, and to hope it's in time to avert some real severe consequences. But unless we do it, unless we get those technologies in place and available and standardized, they won't be done, and they can't do it. So that's the solution from our standpoint, and that's why we're focused on Emma as empowering homes, buildings, consumers, and communities.
Exactly. Well put there, Tim.
Ludo, in closing?
Yeah, I think the key behind all of this is the combination of the technical will and the technical abilities of providing the solutions, right up to the policy and procedures that are needed to accomplish it. So we can have some of the best technology in the world, but if the policies and the procedures don't support that, then it doesn't go forward. And I think within the committee and within Emma, we can provide the solutions, the technical solutions, but we're also going to need higher levels of government and of organizations to really be able to deal with this climate emergency that we have.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to close in recommending every politician and consumer and business owner and utility read Solar Today, Fall 2020, the article by Tim Shukley, Intelligent Energy Operating System for the Solar Homes and Microgrids of the Future. I found it very interesting that you say it may make these huge investment in be they nuclear plants or hydro dams or what have you, obsolete, notably because they take so long to put into service, right, Tim?
Right, and you can put solar panels on your house in within just a few weeks. You know,
it's a few weeks.
And it could be. It's mass produced. It's a consumer product. Electricity and its appliances are now mass market products. They're not centralized utility products anymore.
Exactly. Well, Ludo Birch, Horizon Technologies, and Tim Shukley in Colorado. You're at Colorado State University also, faculty. Thank you very, very much for this really fascinating talk, and we should do it again in the future.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.